Greetings everyone, this is Tanya at I Love Iodine. This video for Foraging Fridays is going to be on wild lettuce. Specifically, I'm going to be showing some video of my backyard of the prickly lettuce, but before we get started, I'm just going to talk at a high level about this genus, the Lactuca genus of the wild lettuces. There's a lot of different varieties of that. We have a few that are native to the eastern United States, as well as some that are non-native that have been naturalized here. All lettuces are in the Asteraceae family. And this is the family that you're going to find dandelions, chicory, sunflowers, and other plants like that you might be familiar with. Now, edible uses, this is lettuce. People know what to do with lettuce. This is what we make salad with. And this is the genus that they have cultivated our, domesticated lettuce that one would, grow in their garden and things like that. Of course, there's lots of cultivars that have been developed over time. And things have changed. Wild lettuces do have a little bit of a difference. When you go into the store and you get your lettuce, when you break off a piece, you don't have any milky sap in it. But of course, if you have wild lettuces, you do. That's in fact where the name Lactuca comes from. Think about lactose, things like that. So that is derived from, meaning related to milk. So edible uses, of course, young leaves, they can be eaten raw, as a salad green or on sandwiches, cooked, green, sauteed like spinach. If you haven't cooked your lettuce, it's an easy way to actually add it into some of your entrees, especially if you need to use it up. And I've done that. I learned that a little bit ago. And also, if you want to reduce the bitterness, of course, you're going to find that more in the wild lettuces than some of the cultivated, because they've kind of, developed those to be milder. Now, there's a reduction in nutrition often that we see when we do that. And of course, the other health benefits. You're basically taking the medicine out of the food when you add in, the mildness. Basically, you're adding in water and, losing a lot of the real benefits that we could be deriving from the foods that we would find in the wild. But if you wanted to reduce the bitterness and still getting the medicinal benefits from it, you can just saute it with some butter, vinegar, and, or mix it with some other milder greens, which is a really good way to introduce it into your diet that way. Another way we can eat it is the developing flower heads, and that's before the stems unfold and the flowers bloom. Now, the one I have growing that we're going to be seeing, it's an annual, and it will just sprout up out of nowhere, and then it will go into its seeding stage and very shortly. Most of them will flower from June to October, depending on the species. I usually expect where I live to see the prickly lettuce starting to flower by July. Maybe a little bit earlier, depending. I think this year will be a little bit later because it's been a little colder. It's currently the end of May, so we'll see where things are whenever we go outside. But the developing flower heads, before the stems unfold and the flowers bloom, you can actually add them to casseroles and chop them up, and they do add a very interesting bitter seasoning to your food. And where you can find these, of course, especially when we're dealing with the prickly lettuces, you're going to find those in disturbed areas, waste places, roadsides, clearings, and woods. Thickets, and dry open woods. My yard is where you're definitely going to find some prickly lettuce as well. Now, when you're dealing with the native, like say the tall blue lettuce as well, and there's another blue lettuce, those are going to be typically, you're going to find those more in the wooded areas that haven't been disturbed, but those really aren't the ones we need to be foraging for. One, they're not as palatable in my opinion, and two, they're often quite rare, so you don't want to be taking those. Whereas when you're dealing with the introduced species, they are really everywhere, and they're not necessarily invasive, but in some areas they might be a little viewed as such. Now, medicinally, the sap of the Lactuca, plants in the Lactuca genus, they could be applied to your skin to treat warts, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Lactucarium and how that's been used in the past and is still currently being used. And we're going to talk about a little bit with the identification, but we'll do just the prickly lettuce today that we'll be going over. I'll go over some other lettuces as the season goes on. You can also definitely check out some of the other slides and stuff that I have if you go to my website on the different plants and just view those as well. And those will be getting posted in June, so just keep an eye out for those. I'll put the link to my website in the description as well. But as stated, there's a wide variability. Of course, we have colors of the flowers that can range from yellow to almost white. They can be reddish. They can be tinged on the outside. You might find blue. And I'm talking seriously blue flowers. They're very beautiful. Some can be light, some can be, much darker, depending on, of course, the exact species and the time of year. There's a variability as flowers get older. They have a tendency to fade. Most are biennial, some are annual. It depends, and some can be a little bit of both. Sometimes it's hard to actually discern. And the other thing, too, we're dealing with the composite family here, and we are dealing with, ray florets or disc florets. This one actually only has ray florets, no disc florets. So for the botanists out there, you can definitely check into that. And the sap is a milky bitter latex, okay? So again, as in Latin, Lactuca means milky extract. Now, what would this be? As you might hear about wild lettuces being called opium lettuces or poison lettuces. They're not actually either. There's no opium in them. There's nothing like that specifically. But it does serve as a nervine, so it's very good for anxiety. And it's a very good pain reliever. So that is why it has gotten that distinction, that it was often given historically for those purposes, and even in modern herbalism today. So the milky fluid is secreted by several species of the lettuce after it's dried, hardens, and turns brown. That's where you're going to call the lactucarium. And it's known as lettuce opium, and why wild lettuce has been called poisonous lettuce, but they do not contain any opium. Like opium, lactucarium can be reduced to a thick, smokable solid. Lactucarium has sedative properties and used historically as hypnotic. That means a sleeping aid. I'm not going to hypnotize you or anything like that. It has analgesic properties. That means it's pain relieving, and it is used for that purposes. It also possibly acts as a narcotic and an anticonvulsant. It is also stated that using this by smoking it, especially in the concentrated forms, can give a mild sensation of euphoria, could be possibly slightly hallucinogenic. Concentrations of lactucarium are low in young plants, but increase in older plants, occurring highest when in the blooming period. So that's very interesting. Lactucarium also has antispasmodic, digestive, laxative, and diuretic properties. Diuretic means it helps reduce fluids, decreases gastrointestinal inflammation, and uterus contractions. You can definitely check out some of the research that's been done on this plant. It's really interesting. In about 1898, this plant was actually listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia in the 1911 British Pharmaceutical Codex for use in lozenges. I guess it's lozenges. Where I come from, we never said that incorrectly at all. Tinctures and syrups as a sedative for irritable cough or as a hypnotic. Again, that means a sleeping aid in dealing with insomnia. Standard definition of lactucarium in these codices required its production from Lactuca virosa, which is not the species that we'll be looking at today. But there are some people that state that the prickly lettuce actually is a higher quality. There's a lot of debate on that. And of course, there could be the situation where maybe there's been some hybridization as well. I can't speak to that. But anyway, whenever we're dealing with smaller quantities of this can be produced in a similar way from Lactuca sativa. That's typical garden lettuce, but of course you're not going to get very much. And then there's a Canadian wild lettuce and the lettuce opium obtained from the prickly lettuce. They state that it's a superior quality, so we shall see. It definitely does produce a lot of the sap as well. I do not. When I was researching this back in the day before I started eating the wild lettuces, it was stated that you had to boil it in 2 changes of water. No, you don't. I eat it raw all the time. I eat it once it starts growing. I eat it on my sandwiches almost daily, and it's very, delicious. Definitely bitter, but I really enjoy it. And it does, of course, have the prickles on it. You might wonder how you eat it raw. It doesn't really hurt at all, so it's not even a situation. You'll see the prickles when we look at the video and some of the pictures in a moment. From WebMD, for better or for worse. It's used for whooping cough, asthma, urinary tract problems, cough, trouble sleeping, restlessness, excitability in children, painful menstrual periods, excessive sex drive in women. So for any nymphomaniacs out there, this might cure it. Muscular joint pains, poor circulation, swollen genitals in men, and as an opium substitute in cough preparations. Interesting collection there of uses, I would say. The seed oil is used for, quote, hardening of the arteries, for that's atherosclerosis. And obviously that would be, I would say to not harden them. I think it would be the opposite. It's for, to treat that condition, one would assume. And as a substitute for wheat germ oil. Some people apply the latex directly to the skin to kill germs. That sounds reasonable to me. Some people smoke wild lettuce for a recreational high to get a hallucinogenic effect. I smoke wild lettuce, but I definitely can't say that I got high from it, but you know, it's calming, you know, and it's the only thing that I smoke. Interesting. I do collect it and dry it out, so I'll do that again this year. So I used to smoke cigarettes, gave that up. I recommend anybody that does smoke cigarettes maybe might try giving that up. It's not a good habit, and I definitely can sympathize with it taking a very long time to do so. Anyway, I digress. Let me get back to this. So prickly lettuce, this is what we're going to go out and see. This is the Lactuca serriola. Again, in the same family, Asteraceae, as you know, common plants that we would find, the asters, the daisies, sunflowers, dandelions, chicories, etc. We're going to see some of it out. Now, this plant is really interesting. You definitely can see that the leaves here are a kind of a waxy gray-green, and you see all those prickles. Check those out. Now, there's a lot of variability in the leaves. Sometimes you'll find them to be very deeply lobed. Sometimes we'll find more of a lanceolate shape. We'll see that out there as well. Even if you look down at the picture, some of the ones at the bottom don't have those lobes, but on the same plant, it gets much more deeply lobed. You are going to see teeth. And again, we're going to see those prickles. And this is, of course, when it flowers, but we are a little bit ways from that. They also call this the compass plant because the leaves kind of at the top kind of turn to face the sun. You know, it's just a plant that's trying to get that. It's not the same compass plant. There's also some people that refer to this as milk thistle. This is not the same milk thistle that you would think about that is very good for your liver. That is a different plant completely. But of course, we have to be careful with the colloquial names. It's very important to know the botanical names. Keeping in mind that there are plants out there that have multiple botanical names because there are synonyms. They've also been plants that have been one family and they've switched as botanists have, you know, further science has advanced and they've realized that it would be better categorized somewhere else. So definitely make sure you cross-reference a lot of the plants before you consume them or touch them, making sure that you know what you're doing. Of course, do your research as well. That being said, this plant here, it's not uncommon to see red in this plant. Very common to see it. It's not a big deal. You'll see more low growing here. This was probably some first year. It's probably operating more as a biennial in my yard. It is hard to say. You definitely see a lot of the rays here, and they do have the little cut-ins like you would definitely see with the chicories and of course the dandelions and all those flowers. The seed balls are going to be very similar to what we're going to see with the dandelion, just not as pronounced. Also, the flower heads here, you see these clusters. That's another common characteristic, is you'll see on one stem you'll see multiple little flowers, and these flowers are smaller in diameter than you're going to see with the dandelions. All right. So here's just and it'll get to be rather tall as well. And this is just some of the, first year that you'll see growing on the ground. And of course, it's going to bolt up and then go into flower. All right. So the leaves and developing flower heads, that's what we're definitely talking about. 2 to 5 feet, that's what we're going to come and see. It to be annual, biennial, that's, kind of debatable. As stated, young leaves eaten raw, salad green, on sandwiches. I do it all the time. Had some earlier today. Had some yesterday, the day before. I rather enjoy it. I pick it fresh, put it in some food grade hydrogen peroxide water solution, soak it for a half hour, an hour, good to go. And of course, we talked about how you can take the bitterness. Of course, this is for educational purposes only. Please do your own research before you go out there and touch any of these plants or eat them. And obviously you may have a similar situation that you may to other people where you may be allergic to certain plants where I'm not, vice versa. And I think I worded that all kind of backwards and incorrectly, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. Now this one is, fields, waste places, roadsides. My backyard, I've definitely encouraged it to grow. I don't spray here. I've lived here for 5-6 years, and there is no, chemical treatments here at all. And I don't live in an industrial area. I don't live on a main road. So it's a very safe place for me to forage. And I have full permission, so that's a nice thing as well. Make sure you get permission before you forage. Anyway, identification notes, small prickles on the lower part of the stem and the midrib of the leaves. We're going to see that in person. The flowers are going to be pale yellow to yellow. We will not see that today, of course, because it's not flowering, but we will see that in the future. But you can definitely get that from the pictures in which you see. And we are going to see where the sap is a milky, bitter latex. All right, so without further ado, let's get out and check out this plant. And like I said, please do your research. It is not up to me to make decisions for you. It is up to you to do your own research and make decisions for yourself. And that being said, all right, let's go out and check out this plant in real life. All right, now we're back here and we'll see a nice patch of the wild lettuces growing. Now, when we're foraging for food, we have to make sure that we're doing it in a safe place that's, not sprayed, not near an industrial area. Now, this is near where I live. This is lead-free paint and everything's safe. Obviously, I make sure that there's no poisonous plants growing near what I'm foraging for. So just to reiterate what is kind of growing here, we do have some pennycress, completely edible. We have some lamb's quarter, absolutely delicious, extremely nutritious plant growing there. I eat that as well. We have some type of pepper grass there. Of course, that's edible as well. It's a crucifer just like the pennycress is. And then we have some mallow, quite a delicious one. We have some violet leaves down there. We have catnip, yellowwood sorrel, that's the one with the type of plants. It's always good to kind of survey the area on which you're going to be foraging so you don't accidentally pull leaves of something that could be toxic. And we have cleavers, another wild edible as well, that is nice and very safe for my consumption. And then we have some ground ivy. Unfortunately, we have some grass. I have to weed out the grass. I weed out the grass and keep the good plants. People might do it a little bit different than I do. Anyway, what we have here is we have the prickly lettuce that we have just covered, and we see, let's see those prickles there. So they don't hurt at all, and I just eat them. They kind of just smash down really easily. So when I eat them raw, my sandwiches are never ever a problem. And I'm going to take a leaf off because we're going to see the sap. As you can see down at the bottom, it's a less variable. It's not as deeply lobed, whereas we see some at the top that are much more significantly deeply lobed. And then we have some down here that are just almost slant shaped and don't really have any lobes. We also see redness growing through here as well. Again, not an issue. If you really wanted to get a lot of that sap, you could just take this whole plant off. I mean, this is a really kind of a thick, diameter of the plant. Let's see if we can get some of the sap out of this one. This doesn't have a lot. This is going to get more as it gets older, so I'm going to get another one off. There we go, a little bit better. So what we'd want to do is we'd concentrate that, but if we had a wart or something, you can definitely see the milky whiteness there. Not too sticky, but a little bit. Anyway, we have that growing out there, and this is going to get to be about 2 to 5 feet before it flowers. It's a good time to collect it for the milky sap at that point. So it's supposed to be much stronger. Again, good pain reliever. Acts as a, sedating medicine. Has for a long time. Anyway, I hope that helps with the identification and seeing what it looks like in real life as you look down there. And boy, does it grow fast too. I can't even keep up with it. There's no way I can eat all of this. That's why I don't plant a garden. I can't even keep up with my plants that grow without me putting effort into it. Anyway, thanks for taking time to learn about this really cool special plant. And if you have some, you might want to give it a try and see what happens. It's just a natural method, but of course, make sure you do your research. Don't rely upon me, even though I'm going to eat this one that's in my hand. And I trust you, I'll still be here tomorrow. Anyway, peace and love, everybody. And if you can, please subscribe. Give a like, give a comment, check out my website. I'll be putting more content out there as soon as I get a minute. All right, out.